Welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and you're in luck because you're about to hear the 6th session of Bill Yonka's Yarn Factory Listeners Storytelling event that was recorded live on Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee. We will hear from 5 different storytellers this time around: Sean O'Connor, Tina Hudson, Stephanie Vanderweide, who is a Kankakee Podcast Patreon subscriber, whoop whoop, Erik Young, and Roger Hartline. Now, if you like what you hear and want to join us for the next event, Yarn Factory Listeners takes place the second Tuesday of every month at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee at 7 p.m. It's absolutely free to attend, and it's always a great night full of laughs, sometimes sadness, sometimes heartfelt stories, and sometimes you might drop a tear. But usually it's just a lot of laughs and great time. Thank you to Bill Yonka, the Kankakee Public Library, and the Daily Journal for letting us collaborate with them on this monthly event. What do you say we crank out some yarn?
Our first storyteller tonight, I think this guy is so cool just because in so many ways, kind of behind the scenes, jumps into community life and never has any fanfare. And I think that's kind of cool. Like when you get a bunch of stuff done and no one really knows who did it. Isn't that kind of a cool way to be? I admire it, but I'm always the one on the microphone. So people assume I'm doing more than I ever do. But our first storyteller is from Erwin, Illinois. Can you guess what his last name might be? Anybody? O'Connor. Oh, wow. And what he is still like basking in the glory of the Northern Illinois University victory over the weekend as a big Husky fan. And but somebody who I really admire, and I wanted to welcome to the stage for the first time, Sean O'Connor.
So my plan originally was to tell you about the greatest Northern Illinois victory of all time against Alabama in 2003, and when I traveled down there with a group of my friends to Tuscaloosa, but Saturday thwarted that, and so thus I had to come up with something very quickly on the fly. So got a few notes to kind of keep things on track because I tend to ramble, and I'm already going to use up most of my time just talking. But as I hung up the phone, I felt the lump in my throat start to swell. And you know that lump you get in your throat. You know, when you kind of feel it, you're going to cry. You know you're going to cry. It's uncontrollable. Your mind is no longer in charge of your body. Your heart is now in charge of your body. And for me, that's when the levee broke and I started sobbing. And it wasn't the kind of quiet, silent sobbing, but it was that unbridled, snot dripping, slobbering kind of crying. It was January 31st, 2008, and I had just gotten off the phone with the wife of one of my closest friends. Her husband, my old college roommate, Dave Schultz, had been killed while serving in Iraq. Dave was one of those guys who always was willing to give the shirt off his back. I mean, literally. One time, our car broke down when we were coming back from Rockford in the snow, and car full of college guys, and we decided we had to walk to find some help. Dave went through the car to get anything warm we could wear and made sure the rest of us all had something on before he found something for himself. And the only thing he could find was a giant sombrero to wear. And so 4 of us college guys trooping through the snow in the middle of who knows where between Rockford and DeKalb went down the road, followed up in the rear by Dave wearing a sombrero and some gym shorts. And quite frankly, I don't think, well, don't be too shocked because he's a college guy. It's okay. College guys are strong like that. I don't think Dave actually owned a pair of pants other than his ROTC fatigues. He always had gym shorts on. He had a big heart, but was not an impressive dresser. The thing about it was that he was always looking out for others. He started a program in his hometown of Blue Island while he was serving in Iraq to collect soccer balls and donate them to Iraqi children who were in Iraq, obviously not having anything to play with. And so that program flourished while he was serving. Dave left behind his wife and a 6-month-old he had just gotten to meet once. The week after was a blur of memorials, wakes, and church services as Dave was honored in both Blue Island and his wife's home of Galena. After a week of emotional exhaustion, I was ready to return to a level of normalcy at my job at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb. But here's the thing. If you know anything about NIU, in the second week of February in 2008, you would know that on Thursday, February 14th, in the late afternoon, a gunman burst into a crowded lecture hall and opened fire, killing 5 people before ending his own life. And while I was not directly involved, the office I worked in was a mere 500 yards away. And this was profoundly impactful for me because this was 2008 at a time when cell phones were just kind of in their infancy. Text messaging wasn't widespread. It was not something that everybody did. So landlines were more the norm. And what we learned real quickly was that when you have the parents and loved ones of 20,000 students calling in to check in on if they're safe, that crashes the entire network. So we were left in an office buildings around campus without any way to communicate or understand what was going on. At this point, I was emotionally exhausted. And my friend JT, who I worked with, was also emotionally exhausted. We decided we needed a break, a vacation, a time to mentally unplug. And for 2 recent college grads with art degrees, the options were, well, slim. But we did love skiing. And we loved the idea of freshly packed snow, the wind in our hair. Back in college, I had beautiful, luscious locks. And warming by the fire at the end of the day. And what isn't to love about skiing? And we quickly convinced our girlfriends that we all needed to go on a ski trip to the biggest mountain we could find. And if there's one thing that the Midwest has, it's incredibly impressive mountains for skiing. We settled on Granite Peak in Wausau, Wisconsin, about 6 hours away. And I should take this moment to kind of mention an aside. When I was in college, I was in a fraternity. And one of our strongest sayings that has always stuck with me is there's opportunity out of every defeat. Every setback in life is a chance to excel, to learn, to grow, or at least find some type of positive. So on the last Friday of February, we loaded up and headed up to Wausau. We opted to stay at what I assumed was the last Hojo in existence. Was it the Hilton? No. Was it the Ritz-Carlton? It was not. Did it have bed bugs? Pretty sure it did not. Regardless, the next day, JT and I hit the slopes, and our girlfriends opted to spend a day at the spa instead. We spent the morning carving up our runs and enjoying our time. Around mid-morning, we were going down a run, and I hit a patch of bad grooming and lost control, and everything went black. I woke up at the base of a tree, and JT was asking me if I was okay. He said, hold on, I'm going to go get some help before disappearing. And a short time later, he returned with 2 ski patrol members. One hopped down and helped push me back out of the tree while I was in. And they started peppering me with questions. Did you hit your head? Who? Me? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so. What's your name? Yonka. And it came out like that. Where are you from? DeKalb, Illinois. Go Huskies. Go Huskies. Who's the president? George W. Bush, not George H.W. Bush. I knew that for sure. What's today's date? At that point, I was stumped. I knew it was past my birthday, but it couldn't be St. Patrick's Day because there was snow on the ground, and I never forget a St. Patrick's Day. I mean, I was sitting in the snow, but I didn't remember getting my girlfriend a Valentine's Day. So it might be before that. I said, I hedged my bet. It's probably February. think at this point, the ski patrol guys decided they had had enough, and they put me on their little sled and took me down the mountain. We got to first aid, and they prepared to call an ambulance. But hey, I was tough. I was a young guy. Plus, this was Wisconsin. I was clearly out of network for my insurance. I could not afford a trip to the hospital. And we had paid a lot of money for this trip. I was going to be just fine. What I needed was a helmet. JT and I headed to the ski lodge to get me a helmet. JT interjected multiple times and said, man, I really think we need to go back to the hotel and you can rest. And I said, nah, I'll be fine. I just need a helmet. Now, has anybody gone skiing before? The one thing they outfit you in is ski boots. And they're very beneficial when you're skiing because they keep your ankles stiff. They keep them from turning. They keep your legs in a forward motion. And they're kind of fun to walk around in. You kind of ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk around. They're really fun unless you're having a tough time staying upright. And in my case, these stiff boots were making it very hard for me in a world that was increasingly tilting to the side. I assumed what I had was a concussion, but I figured I would be okay. My journey to the equipment counter was approximately from here to the bar, and I decided to take 3 breaks on that way because it was a long walk. JT decided after the 3rd time of me sitting down, it was probably a good idea I go back to the Hojo to rest. What follows is a masterclass in what absolutely not to do when you have a head injury. Back at the Hojo, I immediately opted for a nap, which is always a good idea when you have a head injury. After a while, I felt solid enough to go out to eat. And for dinner that night, I remember opting for a cup of soup and spending the whole time in the bathroom throwing up. The world was constantly at a 35 to 45 degree angle. My head was throbbing. With dinner cut short, we returned back to the Hojo for the night and called it an early night. And again, I opted to hang out in my new favorite place, a bathroom, throwing up. The next day, we decided it's probably best for all of us to cut the trip short and head home. I was in incredible pain, and it was getting worse and worse by the minute. Again, no idea, had a head injury, just probably a concussion. When we returned home, I decided again that what I really needed to do was just sleep this off. It was becoming very bad and very painful. So bad that my logic was coming to the point where if I poke my eyes out, the pain will go away. I explained this idea to my girlfriend, and she decided it was time for me to go to the ER. And a few scans later, we knew what the culprit was. I had fractured my skull and had a hematoma forming rapidly. But what to do about this pain? Well, that's when the good doctor offered a solution for that. Morphine. Now, if you've never been on morphine, here's the thing. As soon as the morphine hits your bloodstream, you instantly realize how people become addicted to morphine because all of your cares in the world go away quickly. The ER doctor tried to explain to me what the best course of action was, but I was belting out, quite frankly, the best rendition of Eddie Money's 2 Tickets to Paradise that anyone had ever heard. The doctor realized he wasn't going to get through to me, so I told him to explain it to my girlfriend. They brought her back. He said, if the swelling on his brain doesn't go down soon, because I got 2 tickets to paradise, it will cause irreversible damage and possibly kill him. We don't have the ability to treat him here in DeKalb. We're going to, won't you pack your bags and leave tonight? We're going to have to move him up to Rockford. And how is he going to get there? My girlfriend asked. We're going to fly him by helicopter. As the sound of a helicopter on the roof of the hospital grew increasingly louder. Me, in a moment of lucidity, said, won't the atmospheric pressure cause my head to pop like a zit? And they both looked at me like I was insane. Seeing the rationale I presented, they opted to take me by ambulance to Rockford. I'd later find out it was my insurance who nixed the helicopter ride. They claimed that I didn't get pre-approval for the ambulance ride, either because I didn't call ahead of time, it was 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, or that I was semi-comatose doped up on morphine. But that didn't bother them. I can't help but wonder if they took the back roads on purpose in that ambulance. As we bumped and jostled down the roads, the paramedic in back would gently lift my head whenever the driver would shout, "Tracks," as we hit another set of railroad tracks between DeKalb and Rockford. What followed was 5 days in an ICU in Rockford, joined by my mother and girlfriend. Over the coming days, as I slipped in and out of consciousness, I was subjected to a plethora of MRIs, CTs, CTS scans, whatever you can think of. And we found out my odds of survival were right around 50-50. On day 5, though, I was able to re-enter society. And while I was told I would make a full recovery, there would be some changes as well. I would be irritable, I would be absent-minded, and I would be prone to doing odd things. And one night, my girlfriend came downstairs to find me making cookies at 3 a.m. "What are you doing?" "I want some damn cookies, can't you see that? And we don't have any damn cookies." She stood there stunned, and I felt terrible. There it was. At that moment, it clicked in my mind. My girlfriend had opted to stay by my side this entire time. She made sure I got to the ER. She made sure she understood the course of care I was going to receive. She made sure to call my parents in the middle of the night and let them know about my injury. And she stayed by my bed in the ICU the whole time. Hell, she had even opted to share a room with my mother. A hotel room at that. She could have walked away. She could have said, "This is too much, I'm not in this." But instead, she decided to stick by me and love me no matter what. And there it was, my opportunity. Past month and a half had been nothing but defeats for me, but there was my opportunity. In 2 weeks from now, we will be celebrating our 15th anniversary.
Well, that's how you end that. Okay. I wanted to know more, but thank you, Sean. Let's give Sean another big round of applause. Doing all the wrong things with a head injury. This is like for Riverside where you work. This is like proactive sort of things where you're telling people what not to do when you have serious things going on in your life. Our next storyteller tonight, I think this is wonderful because she was in touch with me earlier this week saying, "So what position do I go in?" I was like, "Oh, I hadn't really thought about that yet." Just, "Oh no, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just happy to do it. Just want to know." I love that kind of energy. And Tina Hudson is a mother of 3 adult children. And I love, because I understand this having kids myself, who the real heroes are, the ones who are really your favorite, are the people who take care of you in the other times sometimes. So no matter how good or me or my ex-wife could be, Helen was always the best. And I'm sure there's kids around our community and beyond who will sing your praises too. And I'm so excited that you're here to tell a story. Let's give a big warm welcome to Tina Hudson. Put it up, you do whatever you want now.
Hello, everyone. I want to let everyone know that you're actually looking at a miracle tonight, and I'm going to go into that while you're looking at a miracle, witnessing a miracle tonight. I was born October the 14th, 1969, 1.5 pounds. 1.5 pounds. Technology then, and they told my mom, they said, "You know what? I don't think she's going to make it." My mother said, she just looked and she said, "I think she a fighter. I think she gonna make it." And so I was like, okay, I was like, oh. She said, my mother said she prayed and she cried and she cried and she prayed. And she was like, she a fighter. I know she got fight in her. I could just look at her and tell. And I was like, okay, she could tell that at 1.5 pounds, but okay. She really loved me. Okay. And as I began to grow, I never had pictures. My grandfather used to hold me in the palm of his hand. And we had pictures at one time, but our house, we had a fire and we lost everything. And so they got really creative when I came home. They put me in a decorated shoebox in a basket. I said, oh, I wish we had TikTok back then because I don't know. I mean, they were in 60s, early 70s. They did the best they could. And as life went on, I always was like, okay, I'm trying to struggle to see where I fit in. I was always small and skinny, and I was like, I don't know where I fit in life with people. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make myself fit in. And I did that. And when I was 15, I began to write and was writing and writing. So when I turned 20, I was like, okay, when I'm writing, okay, it's rhyming at the end. So I was thinking maybe I could be a rapper or something. And I was like, okay, I could be a rapper. I could see that. But then I was like, no, writing poetry, it just, a lot of things that I was coping with, it helped me to get through just writing. And I said, well, I can't be a rapper. Not at this age, in this stage in life. I'll just, go with it and just continue to write. So that's what I did. And I'm just so glad to be here. I'm a little shy of turning 55, October the 14th, real soon. So I'm happy about that. And so I'm just going to take a few more moments. If I could just read something that I wrote really quick here. And these glasses, they didn't come from Pearl Vision. They actually came from a local discount store, so they're not real. I really can't see you, but it's okay. Thank you, Lord, for saving me so that I can tell my story. At 1.5 pounds, they counted me out. I showed them wrong without a doubt. I came here a fighter, and I will be one to the end. I am so grateful for the love of my family and friends. Sometimes this life is such a joke. Writing definitely helped me to cope. So never let anyone tell you what or who you should be. Look at me. I am a living testimony.
Tina, thank you so much. It's funny. Thank you, Tina. Let's give her a big round of applause. It is funny. I stopped to grab my program from over there, and our next storyteller is not in the program. This was a bonus storyteller who I talked to about doing this and was like, well, we're figuring it out. And then, yeah, it's going to happen. So I think it's so unique that someone comes from another place and jumps into our community. And sometimes I think it helps us who have been here a long time to help to see things through the eyes of somebody who's brand new, who says, no, I want to help work on this. Let me help. Let me do some things. And Stephanie has been that just in an amazing, amazing way. So Stephanie Vanderweide has come to our community to work in her environmental work, but you can also find her out in parks, either running or finding trash to pick up. And let's give her a big round of applause. Stephanie Vanderweide.
Thank you. My birthday is October 13th, so had to get that. Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, so whenever I meet new people from Kankakee, the first question I get asked is, where'd you move here from? And when I tell them I moved here from the Pacific Northwest, they always get this look on their face and they ask why. So my story is the answer to why and what it's like being a transplant here in Kankakee. So I'm originally a Kansan, and in 2017, me and my husband moved to the coast of Georgia. And in 2019, for work, I moved to the Pacific Northwest, where I was really excited to meet new, quirky, nature-loving people, to be part of the community and to turn a house into a home. So the first year, I did make some good connections in the community, and but none were really substantial. So I reached out to volunteer, and I reached out to a couple organizations, and I was told repeatedly that you already had to be part of a group to participate in volunteer activities. So the house that we had, it was a very cute house, but it never really felt like home without having a large family gathering, the christening of a large family gathering. So 2020 hit, and even with the beginning of the pandemic, I did make a very beautiful connection in the Pacific Northwest. It was with the lake and myself. So Lake Sacagawea was a block away from our house, and I would walk that lake every single day. The lake was a training ground, and it allowed me to get quiet and ask myself, what did I want, and who did I need to be to get there? What I found is I wanted to be within a 12-hour drive from my family in Kansas. I wanted to be within an hour drive from the major airport. I wanted to live in a city that had seasons, and I wanted to be in a home that was near walking distance from a park. I knew with these parameters, with my husband and my dog, I could take root and flourish. So gradually, my walks turned into runs. I started talking to God, and I quit my old job and accepted a new job with a company in Kankakee. I'd never heard of this city, but it checked all my boxes. And this time when I moved, I didn't get my hopes up. I didn't make efforts to, meet those quirky, nature-loving friends, build a community, or find a way to turn a house into a home. Instead, I focused on what I was felt called to do and what brought me joy. And so within the first month of moving here, we received housewarming gifts from 4 of our neighbors. Yeah. Within month 2, one of our neighbors hosted a lunch for all the ladies in the neighborhood, where she served a 4-course meal on her aunt's china. We all shared stories. And at the end, she served us a dessert with a sparkler in it. Never have I been the recipient of such a great host. And by Thanksgiving, our house was filled with family that made the 10-hour drive from Kansas. Also, one of my neighbors has become a good friend of mine, and she showed me how to ride my bike from Perry Farm to the state park. And on my long runs, her family will cheer me on. And on my long runs, I listen to the Kankakee Podcast, where I learn about the city. It is such a great tool for somebody who is trying to familiarize themselves with the city as it is now and its history. And organization I felt called to be a part of was the Currents of Kankakee. And if you're not familiar with the Currents of Kankakee, it's a multi-year effort to build up our riverfronts, and it's going to transform the way we live here. And when I reached out, I was met with great enthusiasm. Right away, we started talking about ways that we could collaborate. And one of those was to clean up the parks that are around our riverfront to optimize our public spaces. So on many Saturdays, you'll find me in a park with quirky, nature-loving people working to make the world that we want to see. And this town is filled with people doing what they need to do, spending their time and beautiful energy, making this place the place they want to live in. Most people only dream of doing that. There are so many organizations to connect to here. There's so many parks to play in, and there's so many. Yeah, it's wonderful here, guys. I love it here. So I feel very fortunate to be part of the community. And after being living here for a year, I no longer feel like a transplant, and I feel home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was amazing. Wonderful. Thank you. Since we started doing this event, from the very first one, I've known somebody who I haven't known either that long, but every time he tells me a story, it's entertaining. His energy, his spirit. And I said, well, I'm going to annoy him until he finally does this. And that's why Roger Hartline is here tonight. Let's welcome Roger to the stage. He wanted us to say he's from Kankakee County. He's from Moments, which I think is awesome. Moments is the best. It's in the top 2 or 3 towns I love in Kankakee County. And he's already here. Let's give him a big applause.
Hey, Phil, will you lower this?
What's that?
Will you lower this to
lower this?
Respectful.
Boom.
Yeah.
You can stand like that.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And then this will be like that for you.
Okay, I'm not that short.
Well, and then up like that.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. So I thought a lot about what kind of story I wanted to tell. And I think what I landed on was the temperature at Flanagan's is a little too high. Just a little lower. And while you're taking pictures, get the boobs wet. Not seriously. What I wanted to talk about was spirituality, which I think, if for those who know me, I feel like that's kind of a weird topic for me to choose. Because as Bill said, I grew up in Moments, which is full of heathens. But I grew up a young gay person in Moments, which is an interesting experience to say the least. And my journey with spirituality has been kind of long and strange. So I decided to kind of talk about that in general. Growing up, I went to Our Savior Lutheran, just off 2nd Street in Moments. I call myself a half-lick because my mother is Lutheran and my father is a Catholic. So I've spent many a days in a Catholic church on Sundays as well as a Lutheran church. And I really appreciate church to this day. It was beautiful. We've been confirmed. So going upstairs, everybody. Tough, Thank you. I believe my pastor was run out of town once he was found to be an ex-con. That wasn't a joke. But anyway, so I really dedicated myself to going to church. My parents were not involved in the church, and we only went on holidays, which is really kind of the way to do it, But I found a lot through church. I found a lot about myself. I made a lot of good connections. And as I grew older, I did step away from the church because once I realized who I was, things really changed. Their views of me changed. My views of them changed. And I think it became more of a struggle versus a healthy relationship that it was before. And so where this story kind of takes off is on a bike. Because if you don't know Moments, you can travel to pretty much any part of town in 10 minutes on a bike. if you're 12 years old. It would probably take me an hour. But mostly I would ride my bike all the time over to Edward Chapman Library, right next to the dentist office in Moments. And I would travel often to the local library and look at books. And spirituality was always one of those things. And I think being a gay teen, obviously I would look at weird spirituality stuff because I was searching for some book to tell me that I was accepted for who I was, and then people within that book to believe it. And I ran across a Wiccan book. Yeah, ooh, it's almost October, you know. And within this book, I can't remember the name of this book, but it was written by someone with a reclaimed name. So it was like, you know, Sapphire Wolfsbane. You know, that's who wrote it, you know. No disrespect. Sure. I don't know what it was. But I remember looking at this book and I was going through such a hard time because at the same time that my spiritual family was kind of walking away from me, I felt my peers walking away from me and questioning my existence and questioning who I was. And so in this book, I found so much power and I was like, oh, wow, like this is all about, you know, being who you are and manifesting. That's like the word on every page, you know, like manifest the moon, you know. And I was having a difficult time with a close friend of mine. Those who are in Moments are not allowed to share this story outside of Flanagan's. Just kidding. But I was having a hard time with a close friend of mine. And there was a spell in this book that was like, well, if you want the truth, this is what you do, right? So I casted a spell. Yeah. Listen to how new age this is. This is not, there's no candle and moonlight in this story, unfortunately. I wrote my friend's name on a slip of paper, probably the size of my thumb, and I folded it 3 times because that's what it said to do. And I put it into the microwave. I put the microwave, I set it to like 30 seconds. I'm not kidding. I really wish I was. And while the microwave brewed, or whatever it does, I was to say the same incantation or you know, line over and over again, like so-and-so, tell me the truth, you know, like, tell me the truth. Do you think I'm, you know what I mean? Like, tell me. Also, are we keeping tabs on things I need to, all right. But over and over again, I was saying this incantation and then the timer went off and it was all this lift up and then it was over, you know, and no phone rang, you know, nothing happened. And then I went to school, I think it was like the next day, and sat at lunch in a very small cafeteria. And I remember I was kind of like dogging him. It was me, him, and 2 other friends. I was like, hey, you got anything to tell me, bro? Over and over again. No, really. Do you have anything to tell me? And finally, this is where it gets a little sad. But he said, yeah, I do. I think you're starting to get kind of weird. I don't want to hang out with you anymore. And I've talked to this person. I've talked to this person. There's only 4 of us. And they kind of feel it too. I was completely distraught. Completely ignored the fact that I obviously have manifested this by doing some incantation for 30 seconds in a microwave. But I walked back to my science class, which was actually my homeroom at the time. Mrs. Cook, you know, she always did calligraphy, you know, it was a big deal. And walked back and I was horrified. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't believe that this happened. I didn't know what to do with this information. And immediately I was like, like this guy upstairs is pissed at me. And so I went to the office and was like, my tummy hurts. And I went home, and I remember my sister, Ashley, who is great, picked me up in her yellow Chevy Cobalt and drove me home 2 blocks. My stomach, it was hurting really bad. And I remember I was in the car and she was like, what is wrong with you? They said you were so sick. I'm like, I started crying and bawling my eyes out, whimpering, sad. I was like, so-and-so said this, and they don't want to spend time with me anymore. They're over me, and they said this, this, and this, and everybody thinks I'm this at school. I don't know what to do anymore. And my sister, being very kind, let me vent and was very kind to me and brought me into the home. And I went on, as we all do, you know. And so now I'm a witch. I'm that really should be the end of the story, shouldn't it? It's really faux pas to laugh at your own jokes. I do realize that. So that friendship did end. And I ended up making some really great friends, and started doing Oxycontin every night. It's also a true part of the story. Leave that part in. But my journey spiritually just started there. I sworn off witchcraft. I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is satanic. I mean, this is the devil's work, you know, and I had made a whole altar and everything, right? And I kind of forgot about it, and I decided never to do it again. And then my sister, like a year later, found said altar, which was really just like salt. It was not anything wild, but freaked out. Was like, oh my God, he's into really some dark stuff. She grew up in the 80s, you know, like satanic cults. It was like, this is some really bad stuff, guys. And my mother said, that's where that book has been. The library had been calling my mother for 12 months, looking for the book by, you know, Silver Moon Gaius. And she said, that cost me $20. And I didn't want it anymore, so we promptly returned it to the library. And I went on with my life. And that's my story. But I just want to say that I am currently a therapist. Currently, because who knows? You know? And one thing I learned from this experience in my life and experience working with clients is that manifesting is huge. I didn't do witchcraft. That didn't happen, you know, but I did sit there and ask for communication. And I sat there, took charge of my own destiny, even if I didn't like the result, and really made sure to figure out where I was going to go rather than let people tell me. And that's where I come spiritually. Manifest your own destiny and stuff.
Thank you, Roger. Let's give Roger another big round of applause. Keep that going for a little bit. For the first storyteller of our final ones tonight, somebody who's been a neighbor of us in Kankakee, who has this incredible variety of history. I don't know. Sometimes I think I see people's careers and you think, oh, they've accomplished something really big. And then I think about the other people who I think they've accomplished a lot of stories. They've got a lot of different things that they've done. And I think someone who in his bio said, people don't care about what I know. I think we're going to see otherwise tonight as we welcome to the stage Erik Young.
Thank you. I have everything written down here, not for my sake, but for yours, because I just ramble. My wife will tell you, it keeps going and going. So this is to keep me on track. I'm really glad that Bill sort of pressed me a little bit to do this, because I'm a writer. But I don't get in front of people a lot that tell stories. So I hope this one maybe inspires you or gives you opportunity to think. I will give you a little warning. I use spicy language. This is my voice when I write. So here I am rambling, right? I got my thing right here. So I started doing more writing, just kind of getting some stuff out there, working up some little writing projects. And I had this real struggle with, finding my voice, right? Like find your voice. And I realized my voice that I write with and that I communicate with has a potty mouth. So I apologize for the spicy language just in advance for those of you who may not appreciate it so much. But let me go ahead and begin. So the venerable saint of simplicity, Wendell Berry, writes, the old and honorable idea of vocation is simply that each are called by God, by our gifts, or by our preference to a kind of good work for which we are particularly fitted. I love Wendell Berry, a lot. And I love the possibility that he's right. But this stuff about being particularly fitted is hard for me to swallow. I am now and always have been a misfit. Never fit in really anywhere, which explains my very eclectic vocational life. That's the way I like to say. I just done a little bit of everything. So the idea of slipping into a career path and being successful and fulfilled has not been my experience, like, ever, right? Never satisfied with the career I'm in. There's always something else, right? But by way of analogy, I offer you this. Some people make a vocational journey that looks like an episode of Fantasy Island, right? It all begins with, dumb confidence, stepping into their job like they're stepping off the plane onto the pier, right? I know some of you don't remember Fantasy Island. This didn't come from nothing, all right? So bear with me. I go back even further for the next analogy. But they stepping off the plane on the pier like they own the place. And at some point they get freaked out because they discover they aren't in control of their destiny. But, it all works out because they learn some lesson about overconfidence or some shit. They hop on the plane, wizened and humbled by their experiences, and they live happily ever after, right? I know a lot of my friends from college who are like that. They just knew. They came into freshman year and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. Right. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So that's the one kind of people. That's not been my experience at all. Let me tell you about my vocational journey by way of a different and more horrifying analogy. Mine's been more like the movie Deliverance. Anybody? Got some fans, right? Yeah, going way back. Group of dudes get together for an adventure, rafting a river. It's soon going to be dammed up. And, sure, it all begins as an adventure, right? 4 guys go raft this river. But there are early signs that maybe the whole thing's a bad decision, right? This is probably not a good idea. Locals are giving them side eye. Some blue-skinned kid playing the banjo. Ominous signs. But they're overconfident. And they're sure they got this, and the adventure begins. This sort of fairly sums up my decision to major in psychology. Yeah, I know. But before long, as you're being hurled headlong down an unforgiving river of graduate coursework, getting sucked into eddies of fleeting research interests. You realize that you're losing all your friends, right? And seemingly everybody's trying to you. Sure, there are the Burt Reynolds of the world who overcome all the adversities. They survive and go on with their lives. But in this analogy, I'm not Burt Reynolds. I'm Ned Beatty. So let me give you Exhibit A, like of my just an actual from life. This is the story part. That's all been set up. This is the story. In my mid-40s, I was faced with making a complete career change. The plan where I was going to split my time between being a professor, doing brainy things, and being a hospital chaplain, splitting these things, well, it didn't work out. So tired of being I did what any person with 2 graduate degrees and years of experience doing that nobody really wants to pay for, what that kind of person would do. I went back to school. But this time, I did it the right way. I took my 3 degrees, my years of research, the pieces of my broken spirit, my humility, or actually humiliation, and I enrolled at KCC. Yeah. I went to junior college, treating degrees like Pokemon. You got to collect them all, right? I had the bachelor's degree, had master's degrees. Now you got to go back and pick up the associates, and then we move on. I enrolled in the manufacturing technology program because I decided that wasn't going to do meaningful work anymore. I was going to do work for money, right? Because I was tired of being poor, right? It's a good motivator. So I went back to KCC. I didn't fit in very well with a bunch of classmates who were young enough to be my children. I did pick up some nicknames along the way, though. Gandalf and Pops were my favorite. Those are my favorites. Yeah, in the welding classrooms, like, hey, Pops! All right, that was great. But early on, I made a friend, an unlikely friend. One day during break between classes, I met George. And I know George sounds like the name you make up for the person you didn't want to actually say their name, but his name was actually George. Okay, so just want to get that out there. Despite being a black man in his 20s and I, a beat up and cynical white dude in his 40s, we sort of hit it off. Later that week, while driving home from class, I saw George riding southbound on South Schuyler, right by Shapiro, on this piece of bike. I mean, just wheels were wobbling. It had no seat on it. It was a kid's bike. And George was a full-grown man. So when I got home, I called him and told him that from now on, we're going to carpool to class. So for a full year, we carpooled to school, ate lunch together, studied for classes. We laughed a lot, too. And I learned a lot at KCC. Most of it was about things like machining, welding, metal fabrication, drafting, blah, blah, blah. But I also learned a lot about George. I want to tell you about George tonight. A few things that I'd like to share about George that I think you might be interested in knowing. I learned that George grew up on the south side of Chicago. I learned that George had gotten into trouble in Chicago, and that's why he came to Kankakee to make a fresh start. Of course, you weren't in trouble with the law or anything, right? Right? Yeah? I think she's got more stories to tell. I learned that he had 5 kids and loved them all very much. I learned that he was quite a good chess player. Not from him, from other people told me he was a good chess player. He would meet people at the Kankakee Public Library for chess matches from time to time. I learned that more than anything, he loved to go fishing. He was excited about his kids getting old enough so he could take them out and teach them how to fish. I learned that family was the most important thing to him, so much so that when his brother Theo was having a hard time getting straight, he let him live with his family in a tiny house in South Chicago Avenue. I learned that Theo was not particularly fond of me coming to pick up George. So that's a side story. It was pretty funny. I went to pick him up one morning, and Theo came to the door instead of George. And Theo peeked his head out, and I said, "Hey, I'm here for George." And he goes, "Who are you?" And so I said, "Just a friend of George. I'm his ride." He just shut the door. Nothing. I'm standing there looking at a closed door going, "What the hell?" And then George came out and said, he just doesn't like you. So I'm fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I understand in that amount of time, it's easy to get a pretty good read on me. So I learned that George was a gentle guy who wasn't about that life anymore. I learned that one day George and his brother got into an argument about a couple things, a couple people Theo had hanging around the house. George didn't want the people around his kids, right? Not good people. And that argument between them escalated. Then I learned that on August 20th, 2018, Theo stabbed George in the left ventricle of his heart, and George died. I've had a lot of time to reflect on the short time my friend George and I had together. He wanted to take me fishing and insisted I should learn to play chess. We never got to go fishing, and he never taught me how to play chess. He never got to teach his kids how to fish or play chess either. We were two misfits who were trying to recover from some we got ourselves into. You know, kind of get our lives together. And we found each other in the unlikeliest of places. And I still have a picture of George I keep on my fridge at home to remind me that friendship can form in some really weird places. George may have been murdered, but in telling the story, all of us here are keeping the memory of him alive. As a hospital chaplain, I dealt with a lot of death, seeing people slip through the veil, right, that separates life and death. You see that over and over and over again. It makes you stop wondering what's on the other side of the veil. Right? It's not even curious. But having the opportunity to resurrect my friend George, even if only for a few minutes, it's an honor. And telling you about George is to pull the dead back into the world of the living. And every storyteller has a magical power. And as the past few minutes have demonstrated, you don't even have to be a good storyteller to exercise it. The power of the storyteller is the power of resurrection, to bring the dead back to life. And the storyteller raises the dead. Thank you.
That concludes this Yarn Factory listeners episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening, and to all of our storytellers for allowing us to use their stories for this episode, and for Bill Yonka for letting us be a part of this as well. If you would like to join us in person for the next Yarn Factory listeners, that will be Tuesday, October 8th at 7 p.m. at Flanagan's Irish Pub in downtown Kankakee. As I said before, it's absolutely free. Not the drinks, though. You got to pay for those. Also, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Alex Kerner for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name announced on a future episode, you can sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor, Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.